With how expensive things are getting, I've come to the conclusion that I need to build my own furniture. Our current living room is pretty much empty with just a couch and a TV, so I picked up all the materials I needed from the hardware store and got right to work. I started by measuring and ripping these oak boards down to 6 feet with my miter saw. Then ran them through the joiner to make them as straight as possible because I'm going to be gluing these boards together. I next used this dowel hole jig to drill 1/4-inch holes in the center of these boards before gluing them together just to give them some extra support. And I put a piece of tape on the end of my drill bit so I know how deep to drill. I then sanded them to get rid of any tear out so there's no gaps in between the boards when I glue them together. I then did a quick dry fit to make sure they fit together properly. Then spread a generous layer of tight bond glue onto both of the boards. Clamp the boards together, then use the damp rag to remove any extra glue, and let it sit overnight. The next day, I removed the clamps and brought the boards over to my miter saw to cut down the sides of this entertainment center. And I'm using a 120 tooth saw blade to reduce the amount of tear out because these oak boards are extremely expensive. I then ran the boards through the planer a couple times till they were 3/4 of an inch thick and did the same thing with the top piece. I next chopped the 45-degree miter into all the edges, then measured and cut a piece of this oak plywood down to the same measurements because it'll work as the bottom of this TV stand. So I thought, because I officially made my first mistake and cut the board too short. And like they say, measure twice, cut once, but I measured once and cut twice. Now that that problem was fixed, I sanded the crap out of these boards so I can glue them together. I used masking tape to hold the boards together, then spread a bunch of tight bond 2 onto all the 45-degree miter cuts. Once the frame was glued and nail gun together, I took a square to all the corners. Then used the pocket hole jig to drill holes into the back piece of this TV stand and screwed it into place. And you'll see later in the video why I left a gap at the top portion of this TV stand. I glued edge band onto the exposed plywood edges and inserted the dividers into place. The next step was to build the drawers, so I cut out a bunch of 3/4-inch pieces so I can slide the drawer bottom into place. And I also glued edge band onto all the exposed plywood edges. Sanded them with 180 grit sandpaper, then added a layer of teak oil before putting them together. Doing this will make it much easier because staining the inside of an already put together drawer can be a serious pain in the ass. Once the drawers were put together, it was time to install them, and I'm making my own drawer slides out of wood because I really want this piece to last as long as possible. So I cut out some slats, glued and nailed them into place, then did the same thing with the drawers. I left a centimeter in between the drawer piece and the slide to allow the drawer to slide in and out easily. Once I got all the drawers to fit properly, I sanded the crap out of the inside so I can add a couple layers of teak oil. And just like that, this piece was starting to come together. I added some wax to the slides to make sure the drawers would open and close properly before starting to build the drawer faces. I used plywood for the faces and hardwood for the drawer pulls. And I made the drawer pull by cutting a 65-degree angle onto the hardwood, then gluing it onto the plywood. I finished it with edge band and teak oil and repeated the same process until all the faces were finished. And for spacers, I use brad nails because I always have them laying around and they work well. After a full day of work, I finally got the drawers finished and it was time to make some doors. So I started by ripping down a bunch of 1/2-inch slats so I can install them onto the door faces. I prepped the door faces and spread a thick layer of teak oil before adding the slats. I used tight bond 2 and a brad nailer to secure them into place to make sure they never come off. Then used one of the 1/2-inch pieces as a spacer and repeated the process over and over until I had the entire door completely covered. I then went and cut out the rest of the 1/2-inch slats and realized I made a huge mistake. I cut them all a 1/2 inch too short and wasted a $47 piece, and that was pretty much the rest of my wood, so I had to go back to the store and buy another piece, which completely wasted my day, but I got it done. I then used wood putty to fill all the nail holes, waited about an hour, then sanded the crap out of it. After finishing the faces, it was time to install the soft close door hinges, so I made some measurements and drilled some holes. This is one of many things I learned from Skillshare, which is an online learning community that connects you with pro teachers showing you detailed classes of a wide range of topics like building businesses, poetry, or even woodworking. I use Skillshare to help fine-tune my woodworking skills so I can build projects like this for you guys, which has helped me a ton, especially when it comes to making YouTube videos. You can also learn at your own pace and share your projects with other members in the Skillshare community. So if you have any skills that you want to learn or sharpen up on, check out Skillshare, because the first 500 people to click the link in the description will get their first month for free. Once I finished installing the doors and these little push magnets, it was time to apply a finish onto the outside of this TV stand. So I took the drawers out and brought it outside to sand it really well before using the rest of my teak oil. The next step was to cut down the rest of the wood that I had so I can make the legs, which will be simple but match the aesthetic of the TV stand. After drilling all my holes, I gave them a quick sanding, then brought them over to the floor so I can put them together. And I really wanted to fill the holes with dowels, but I couldn't find any that were made out of oak. I basically grabbed a piece of scrap wood and cut it down to a perfect square that's just bigger than 3/8. I then grinded down both ends so one side can fit into my drill and the other side fit into the hole that I'm about to drill. I then drilled a piece of wood through the piece of metal that I made a hole in earlier, and a 3/8 dowel just magically came out the other side, which was pretty satisfying, honestly. I then gave it a quick sanding, and just like that, I had dowels. So I put some glue into the holes, stuck the dowels in, and cut off the remainder. I then gave them a quick sanding and finished it up with some teak oil, then got the legs installed. And I didn't want to have this beautiful piece just sitting in front of a plain old wall, so I picked up some moldings to add some designs to the wall just to give the room a better aesthetic. And I know I could have used a laser level for this to make my life a whole lot easier, but I simply didn't have one, so I did it the old school way. I cut all the molding pieces to 45 degrees, then brought them inside and installed them onto the wall. Once I finished installing all the pieces, I filled all the nail holes with wood filler, then painted on a layer of Kills primer, let it dry for a couple hours, then came back and painted everything the same color as the wall. By the time I finished with the wall, it was about 11 o'clock at night, but I wasn't going to let that stop me because I was way too excited to see the finished product. So I carried this heavy ass TV stand into the house, put it on a blanket, and slid it over into the living room. I then slid the drawers into place, and just like that, I managed to build a really nice piece. I'm quite proud of myself for this. And I can't forget the Sennheiser Soundbar Plus that we picked up. This company sent me some products to review before, and I absolutely love them. So I picked up this soundbar and one of their subwoofers, which is the reason why I left a gap in the back part of the TV stand to not only run wires through, but to also let air from the subwoofer come in and out. Sennheiser sent me a mini version to review before, so I'll link their products in the description below. But that just about sums it up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.